What he wants. It's good to see you, David. Okay. So yesterday we did the second paragraph on page Kuf Yud Aleph, and we discussed the concept of being bold. It's your call if you should do 2 or 3 pages. You can assign just to do 2, so you leave the third next time. Look through and see what you think.
I want to keep all 3 guys down. I would do 2 if
Okay, sorry. Okay, so we discussed last time the importance of a person being bold in his service of Hashem and not being embarrassed. To be able to face the world, we are servants of Hashem and we follow halacha. And to be able to do that, so if you're offered something to drink and you don't know if it's 100%, even if your boss is offering it to you, to be able to say, I'm sorry, to make a bracha. To make a bracha, a lot of people struggle with that in the workplace, to make brachas. Amnam, 4 lines into the paragraph. And this is the other side. When we talk about the Mishkal HaChasidus, Amnam gam bazeh tzarich chiluk v'havchana. When it comes to this, a person also needs to have a havchana. A person has to know how to weigh the mitzvahs and the halachas that he's doing, to know when is it time to be stubborn and confident and to do it no matter what, and when to say, okay, so I'm not going to do it right now. And obviously you have to know, is it a deraisa, is it a derabanan, is it a minig, is it a chumrah? You have to know what it is. You have to have the right background halachically about a mitzvah and the right background hashkafically about a mitzvah. So amnam gabazeh gam tzarich chiluk v'havchana. I think about this, like, you're not supposed to take 3 steps back if someone is davening Shemona Esrei behind you. You know that halacha? Right? So Ethan, you ever daven for the Amud? Who does? What? Somebody? Let's say Shai. You're davening for the Amud. There are 150 people by Mincha. You daven Shemona Esrei. You're about to take 3 steps back. You see that somebody's davening Shemona Esrei behind you. So you don't take 3 steps, and that guy is going to be davening for 20 minutes. You don't take 3 steps back to start Chazar Sashatz? You do. What do you do? But it says in Shulchan Aruch you have to take, you're not allowed to take 3 steps back when someone's davening. So I'll tell you something. Like, of course, we have to clarify the halacha. One thing is for sure: you're starting Chazar Sashatz. Should you take 3 steps back? Should you start Chazar Sashatz without taking these? I don't know. But someone who's going to be stubborn at that moment, like, why is the yeshiva davening Shemona Esrei for 30 minutes? Well, the guy behind the Shliach Tzibur is still in the middle of Shemona Esrei. Does that make sense? You have to know when it's something that you're stubborn about, and when it's something like, yeah, well, considering the circumstances, obviously we're not going to do that. And it's something to measure. There's a chumrah, it's brought in the Paiskim. There's a chumrah to stand by Kriyas HaTorah. Are you aware of that? There's a chumrah to stand by Kriyas HaTorah. It's a chumrah. It's a chumrah. The chumrah to stand by Kriyas HaTorah. There's a halacha to stand up when the oila makes his bracha. But there's a chumrah to stand by Kriyas HaTorah. Let's say you went to a yeshiva, and at your yeshiva, the minig was that people stood by Kriyas HaTorah. And then you go home Bein Hazmanim, or you're staying somewhere Bein Hazmanim, and 100% of the people are sitting by Kriyas HaTorah. By Sfardim a lot, they I don't even think they have that minute. They sit by Kriyas HaTorah. That's the standard. So, I stand, yeah. I stand. I stand in my shul also. But, the whole reading, yeah. It's not that hard. We're not that old.
That's once a year.
It's nothing. It's really nothing. It's nothing. I stand Kriyas HaTorah. Sometimes I stand by the Haftarah, but the other minhag is to sit. But for various reasons, sometimes I stand and then I speak, and then I daven Musaf, and then I stand to Chazaras Hashatz. So I'm often standing for most of davening. But yeah, it's very helping. So anyway, but the point is, if you're in a place where everyone is sitting, and by you standing, you're going to be standing out. Should you stand because that's your minhag, or should you sit with everyone else? I don't know the answer to that question. I would need to feel the room. I would need to know the people. I would need to have a sense. Is this a time to be confident and makbid about my minhag? It's just a minhag. Or is this a time to be part of the tzibur and to do what the tzibur is doing? That's something that you have to have a mishkal. You have to have a sense of what's the right thing to do here. What do we do here? You know, a person has certain chumras for Pesach. Okay, a person has certain chumras for Pesach. Let's say a person grows up in a home and there are homes like this that they don't eat anything that's not peeled on Pesach. You ever hear that? Any vegetables, fruits, and vegetables that are not peeled. In other words, they'll eat an orange on Pesach, but like a tomato, they'll peel a tomato before they eat it on Pesach. I don't have that minhag, but there's such a thing. There are families that have that minhag, more by Hasidim, but there's such a thing. You've never heard of it? There's such a thing, okay? There's people having that minhag. Imagine you grew up that way, and then you get married, and then you go to your in-laws for Pesach, and your mother-in-law doesn't have the same chumras on Pesach as you grew up with. At which point do you say, this is my custom, this is what I grew up with? And at which point do you say, it's true, but I now joined another family, and I have to be respectful of their minhagim? When do you make that call? A lot of times you need to discuss that with the Rebbe, because you have to know what's at stake, and how does a minhag work, and how bound are you to the minhag of your family, and so on and so forth. But that's a super important thing to be able to have that mishkal. How stubborn should you be? You know, we have a halacha that we light Shabbos candles every Friday night. Okay? We light Shabbos candles. Are you yaitse lighting Shabbos candles with electric lights? What? Yeah. So la halacha is a famous psak from Reb Chaim Oizer. La halacha with electric lights, maybe not every electric light. I'm not going into the sugya la halacha right now. It might be only certain kinds of electric lights. But la halacha, you yaitse with electric lights. Okay? Your wife goes into labor on a Friday afternoon. You're in the hospital, and your minhag is to light actual candles, like I think is all of our minhag, to light actual candles. Now, in a hospital, they're very, very afraid of flames, because there are all kinds of gases, there's oxygen open. It could be quite dangerous to have a flame lit in a hospital, okay? But you're stubborn. So you sit there in the hospital, start lighting Neiros Shabbos while your wife is in labor. Are you a tzaddik or are you stupid?
Stupid. Let me forward than God.
You have to have a mishkal hachasidus. But what happens, Mishal, if you're at home and you realize an hour before Shabbos that you're out of candles? So you're just like, I'll just turn on the lights. No, don't do that. You have a minhag. You meiser nefesh for that minhag. Because that's what we do. Because we are still here. We are still here after 3,500 years because this is what we do. So there's a mishkal, there's a balance that you have to have when you're stubborn. We are super stubborn, but we also have to be sophisticated in our stubbornness. It's about our responsibility to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you could be in a hospital and be like, oh no problem, we'll just turn on a light. But then the next Shabbos you're at home and you're making yourself crazy to get candles because you're not in a hospital and you light candles. So what, you're just going to be lazy? And that's an example of a mishkal, of a balance. It's a balance, mishkal ha-chasidus, a balance of chasidus. Kikol ze nemar al gufei ha-mitzvahs. This idea of stubbornness was said about gufei ha-mitzvahs. the actual mitzvahs themselves. Shechayovim anachnu bohem chayva gemura. That we have an absolute obligation to. Shebohem, that when it comes to those halachos, yosim panav kachalamish, he should make his face like a rock. In other words, the person should be stubborn. Ach yesh eze toisvais chasidus. There are certain additional acts of chasidus. She'im yasa oisam ha'adam lifnei hamoin ha'am. If a person, sometimes a person will take upon themselves an act of chasidus. You have to be very, very, very careful before you do that. Okay? People have a sense of chumras that sometimes, and I hear this a lot from people, why are you doing that chumrah? A lot of people answer, why not? It's easy. Let's say it's easy. Why not? I'll give you an example. When you wake up in the morning, you have a halacha, you have a chiyuv, an obligation to wash your hands. And the obligation is to wash your hands with a cup. How many times on each hand? 3 times on each hand. That's what it says, Lala. 3 times on each hand. Do you know that many, many people wash 4 times on each hand? You know that, right? Mr. Brewer brings that there's a minhag to wash 4 times on each hand. Now, if Simcha Kranz was here, I would say, okay, someone who's Hasidish, that might be, like, for them, like, that's the halacha. Because when you grow up with such strong minhagim, it could be that for him that's the halacha. But let's say for you, you grow up 3 times on each hand. Your Mora taught you when you were in kindergarten, 3 times on each hand. Why not? I'll just do 4 times. I'm saying, it doesn't cost me anything. I'm not paying for the water. Like, I'll do 4 times. Why not? It's very, very, very important to know this, okay? Because, and that's how he got hurt, this guy, by the way, if you're wondering. Okay? Because chumras are an unbelievable thing to do. It's an unbelievable thing to do a chumrah, because a chumrah, the way we're understanding from the Mesilas Yesharim, the idea of a chumrah is that I don't just want to do the letter of the law. I want to make Hashem proud. I want to do more. I want to show how much I love Hashem. I want to show how careful I am not to violate anything. I want to do anything that I possibly can. That's a chumrah, right?
Yeah, people don't do
but
that.
If a person is not ready for a chumrah, and he just takes it on because why not? First of all, that's not an act of chasidus. It's an act of not using your brain. Hey, why not? You don't do that. You don't serve Hashem. That's the most important thing in your life. You don't do anything because why not? It's not a way to serve God because why not? But also, it becomes dangerous because we become unbalanced people. Okay? I want to tell you of something, okay? There's a minhag that's been going around on 1,000 statuses this week. On Tuesday of Parshas B'Shalach, for what? To say the Parshas Haman. Okay? There are people that say the Parsha of... Here's this Chumrah guy. Whatever. The people...
I don't say.
People say the Parsha of the Man. This week's Parsha is where Klal Yisrael started to get the Man. And people say the Parsha of the Man on Tuesday of Parshas B'Shalach is brought down a segula, that it's a segula for Parnasa. And as we know, people will do anything for a segula for Parnasa. Okay? So it was Tuesday. I was sitting in my office, and I thought to myself, oh, it's not Shkia yet. I could say the Parshas Haman. And I made a conscious decision not to say the Parshas Haman. If I'm poor this year, you'll know why. Okay? I made a conscious decision. I am not saying the Parshas Haman. You know how hard it would have been to say the Parshas Haman? Not hard at all. I probably could say it by heart. Okay? I don't know if you're allowed to say it by heart, but I could probably say it by heart. Okay? With Trump. Okay? It's not hard. I'm not doing that. You know why? Because I'm not up to that, because 3 times a day I say a bracha, speaking directly to Hashem, asking Him to give me parnasa. That bracha is Bareich Aleinu. 3 times a day, in Shemona, and I am not yet having full kavana on that bracha. So what kind of a chutzpah do I have to start looking for segulas, which as holy as a segula is, it's a speck of dust compared to speaking directly to Hashem in the middle of Shemoneh Esrei. It's imbalanced. No, I told myself, don't say the Parshas Haman. Daven, Ma'ariv, and have kavana when you say Borech Aleinu. That's what I want. That's what you should do. Be balanced. In Ivrit, they say mi'uzan, like a maznayim. Be balanced. I once had the schus to go with a very, very, very holy Jew to buy Daled Minim in Yerushalayim. He took me under his wing, an older Yid, and he took me to buy Daled Minim. And he looked at an esrig. He was like, yeah, okay, this is good. And I see everyone sitting there with magnifying glasses and going around and picking up all the different minim. And I was feeling a little left out. And this guy, he was a very big Talmud Chacham, and he was a Rav, he was a Rosh Kailel, and he was like, okay, this esrig is good. And then he takes a lulav, and he looks at it, and it's like a little open on the top. He says, yeah, this is fine. I'm like, hey, but it's a little open on the top. He says, yeah, we'll glue it closed. I'm like, what are you, a conservative rabbi? You're going to glue it closed? He says, no, the Mishnah Berurah says that if it's open a little on top, really it's kosher. We're just afraid it's going to open more, so I'll glue it. It won't open more. This is what this guy was a paisik. This is what he told me. I'm coming back. We went back to his house. He lived in Sanhedria. We went back to his house. I'm looking at my Nebi Daled Minim here, and I'm thinking to myself, my friends are out there. They're going to 4 paiskim to show their Daled Minim. And I kind of asked him, maybe it was more with my face than with my words, what are we doing here? Look what's going on out there. Let's get the most Mehuder Daled Minim. He told me, how could guys be out there looking for every chumrah in the world on their esrig, and they're still missing Zman Kriya Shema in the morning? How could that be? Zman Kriya Shema is a din d'oraisa. So you're going to 14 paiskim because you have a chumrah lahalacha, but I woke up at 11. Then I started running to all the paiskim. Why don't you wake up at 9, say Shema, and use an esrog that's kosher? That's balanced. And when a person is imbalanced, his avodas Hashem gets thrown off. Because he starts to consider himself, oh, did you see my Daled Minim? That's something else, yeah. And he starts to be able to distract himself from the things he really needs to work on. His schedule, his responsibility to mitzvahs. It's easy to distract oneself. It's not true, why not on a chumrah? There's a lot of reason why not. It's just not true. A chumrah has to be taken on very carefully. Also, another thing. You know how bad it is to take on a chumrah and then to stop doing it? Guy's in Eretz Yisrael, he's getting super inspired, he's going to start wearing a gartel. You know, the guys like that, right? He's wearing gartel for davening, a special belt for davening. He's wearing a gartel. You think that guy's wearing a gartel in 5 years from now when he's an accountant in the city? You think so? No way. Don't put on the gartel now. You know what? You want to wear a gartel? Keep that thought in your mind for 5 years. And if in 5 years you're thinking to yourself, yeah, I think I'm ready for that, I'm going to take it on and I'm going to do it always, then do the gartel. Chumras you have to be ready for, because to take away a chumrah, that's a very, very serious thing. Okay? Back in the day, B'nai Torah in yeshivas, when they were single, did not have beards. Okay? Today the lines are much more blurred. But back in the day, if a guy grew a beard, his Rosh Yeshiva would be like, please shave that off. There are yeshivas today like that. You don't just grow, come on. And then after they get married and they're learning in Kailul and they're becoming, bigger Talmidei Chacham, at a certain point they would grow a beard. Okay? There was an understanding in the world at the time that don't grow a beard. But if you grow one, you keep it on. You don't play arts and crafts with it. Because it's a holy thing. Nowadays we forgot that it's holy. We think it's a style. But there used to be a certain sense of gravity to such a thing. When my father was a young Kailul guy, he reached a certain point where he realized it's time he has to go to work. He has to support his family. Back in the day, the world of computers was the Wild West. It was just a new thing, you know. Bill Gates was still in college, you know what I mean? Like, it was like a different world. And my father never spent a day in college, but he read some books about computers. He couldn't ask ChatGPT, obviously. He read some books about computers, and he got himself a job in a bank. And he started a career in computers that he just retired from a few years ago. Okay, those were the days, you know. You read a book and got a job. Can't do that today. But also we can't read a book today, but whatever, that's another thing. But anyway, my father had been teaching for a little bit before he went out to work. And then he realized it's not going to work. Like, he has to support his family, and he went to get a job. He worked in a French bank. My father knew French. He learned French in yeshiva in high school. So he was able to get a job in a French bank. But he was hired by another place before, and he came to the interview, and he had just grown a beard, like a few months before. He comes into the interview. He does great. He aces the interview. They say, you're hired. You know, congratulations, you're hired. Just do me a favor, come in on Monday without the beard. Back in the day, you were able to. Today, no one will say that to you. Okay, today you could have 14 piercings and hair coming out from all sides. No one will say a word to you, you know, because they don't want to rock the boat, you know. They don't know how you identify, you know. But in those days, they were able to say, come in on Monday without a beard. My father ran back to his Rebbe. His Rebbe was an Israeli. He didn't know English, so, you know, he had like a interesting English accent in speaking English. And he tells his Rebbe, I got the job. They just said I should go on Monday without a beard. I just grew the beard, so maybe I'll just take it off. It's new. His Rebbe was like, tell them to go in the lake. Okay? That became like a thing in my family. But the idea was, you took something on. You were mekabel something. I'm not talking about beers. Today maybe it's a little bit different. But that's not my point. My point is, you accepted something upon yourself. That means something. Don't just, okay, oh no, I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm done. You know? Don't do that. Don't start saying karbanos in the morning and then stop. Be ready. Start slow. Maybe start with Pesukah de Zimra. Coming on time for Pesukah de Zimra. Start slow. Do things in a measured, balanced way. Doesn't that sound reasonable? That's how we grow in Avodas Hashem, in a measured, balanced way. And then when we're ready for a chumrah, then we take it on and it becomes part of us. My Rosh Hashiva once told us there's a parsha in the Torah in Parshas Nasai called the parsha of Nazir. A Nazir is someone who's makabel on himself with a neder that he's not going to drink wine, he's not going to be mitamei l'meisim, and he's not going to take a haircut for a certain amount of time. A Nazir. In the parsha of Nazir, it says, listen to this unbelievable thing, it says, when it's describing the halachas, it says, Zois Teiras HaNazir. This is the Torah of the Nazir, right? I mean, this is the Torah of the Nazir. This is everyone's Torah. My Rosh Hashiva said, don't take on random chumras. When you know that Hashem wants you to do this, it says in your Torah to do this, then you do it. And until you're confident that it says in your Torah to do it, don't do it. Zois Teiras HaNazir. This is the Torah of the Nazir. In the Nazir's Torah it says, I'm ready for this chumrah. If you're not ready for it, don't do it. So I know that the Mesilas Yesharim is about to tell us about what to do if you take on a chumrah. But how could we learn about what to do if you take on a chumrah before we learn how dangerous it is to take on chumras and how careful we have to be ready for it and to engage in it and to take it on with ownership, and then once we do take on a chumrah, to do it forever. Yashikayach. Okay, there's two sides of a page over there.